If you're at least a bit into art, you're probably familiar with the French impressionist painter Claude Monet. I love his work. He managed to create such calming and immersing scenes where you just want to step into the painting and relax a bit in his world. So of course, as a 3D artist, I wanted what his paintings would look like in a 3-dimensional space. And that's exactly what we're gonna do today. I'm using Blender to recreate one of his most famous paintings, the water lily pond, which he painted in 1899. The first object of the scene we're gonna make is the bridge. That's a pretty simple object, so after a few minutes of modeling I was able to unwrap it and import it into Substance Painter for texturing. Here we slap some color onto it and we add some grunge and moss to make it look old and used. When that's done, we can simply export those textures and import them into Blender. And with that, we got ourselves the first object of the scene. As you could probably already tell, I'm not going for a realistic style in this case, but more of a stylized look, because I just loved that style and Monet wasn't going for a realistic style either. I'm not gonna go too deep into the creation of the plants, because I already made a video about stylized nature in Blender, which you can watch right here. But briefly summarized, I created the leaves with a transparent background in Photoshop and then import them into Blender. For the base of the tree, I'm using the Freeze Sapling Tree Gen add-on. Here we can tweak the settings a bit, but when we're done we can convert it to a mesh and then unwrap it again. When I did that, I imported it into Substance Painter and gave it a bark texture, which I later realized was totally useless because you can't even see the bark in the final render anyways. But then back in Blender I use a particle system to put the leaves on the branches of the tree. And with that, our weeping willow of the scene is done. For all of the other trees of the scene, I use the exact same technique as in the stylized nature video, which I already told you can watch right here. For these bushes on the side of the river, I paint a single blade of grass in Photoshop with a transparent background, then again import it into Blender and create a particle system on a small plane. Now we get to the most important objects of the scene, which of course are the water lilies. I painted a leaf of those in Photoshop, imported it into Blender, but instead of using it as an alpha texture, I modeled a plane around it so I could later add a solidify modifier to it and give it some depth. The flowers are just a few planes which we can deform with the proportional editing by pressing O on the keyboard, and then importing it into Substance Painter again and giving it a slight gradient effect. And with that, all of the models of our scene are done and we can start building the scene. To get simple water, I always use this technique where I just add a plane with a roughness of 0, a specular of 1 and a metallic of 1, and then add a normal map which looks like waves. Then using a particle system and weight paint, we can grow the bushes we made on the side of the river. And we can put the water lilies that we made on the surface of the water. I just threw all the models that we made into the scene and tried to align it with the original image. To make the scene look a bit better, I added a big cube with a volume scatter node to add some light fog. And with that we come to the final stage of the process, which actually took me the longest of all. This stage is just tiny tweaks with the camera and the lighting and moving around objects slightly. Yeah, this actually took me a few hours to get it look okay. But when I was finally happy, I could press F12 to render the image. But we're not finished yet. The very last step of the process is the one I always used to overlook, but it's extremely important. Post-production in an image or video editing software will always extremely boost the quality of your artwork. In my case, I went into Photoshop, increased the contrast, added a vignette and highlighted the bridge. And here's my final version of Monet's water lily pond in 3D. If you're interested in creating art, I'd highly recommend you look at some classical paintings, because I think there's a lot we can learn in terms of lighting, composition and color from those old painters. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this quick video. I'd highly appreciate some feedback in the comments and I wish you a good day.